Ladies and gentlemen, the second to last major chess event of 2024 has just begun. It's the Champions Chess Tour final, and it's being held in Oslo, in Norway. In fact, if you live in Oslo, I believe tickets are still available. So you have a chance to go watch Magnus Carlsen, Vincent Keimer, Levon Aronian, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Alireza Firouzja, and the rest of the field whose names I cannot remember. Yanni Pomnishi, and I don't want to forget anybody else. But you can watch them all play in Oslo, Norway. The last event of the year is the World Rapid and Blitz Championship, held here in New York City on home turf. Now, I was about to record today's recap, day number 1, when I saw breaking news on social media. Magnus Carlsen, in partnership, I suppose, with the Esports World Cup, just announced that in 2025, there will be a 16-player knockout event, 10-minute format, esports-style World Cup for chess with a $1.5 million prize pool, and that is going to be held in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. Crazy. I was just about to boot this up, and I saw that breaking news, so go to socials, check that out. It's a lot of money. Damn. And crazy announcement right on the heels of this. So I was about to record today's recap, then I saw that. So, let's get into it. Day number 1 was quite a day. As always, Magnus Carlsen is the favorite in any single tournament that he is participating, but today we had another storyline, which was the young man, Denis Lazovic. Now, those of you that follow chess closely know that Denis Lazovic is a young man from Belarus. He's played in the Champions Tour final in 2023. He also very, very famously and aggressively has been pursued and basically very, very, very openly accused of cheating by Vladimir Kramnik, among, I believe, some other top players. And today he had a great day. And again, remember, all of the cheating accusations in chess, 99.99% of them, happen with the online play. So it's very fun when a man shows up in person after being accused and absolutely torches. So we're going to look at all of that today. I'm going to give you an update. It's an 8-player final. They play like they play like a little round robin, and then 2 go to the semis, 2 are eliminated, then the 4 play survival. I'll keep you posted, don't worry. Okay, first things first, Magnus, first game, off the couch, making recaps, backseating the World Chess Championship, if you will, catching a little bit of flack. Hopefully you guys watched some of my recaps with Magnus and you enjoyed them. And he plays Vincent Keimer, who, by the way, Vincent Keimer just helped Gukesh win the World Championship. Yeah, Vincent, the one and only. Bishop d7, and from the opening, super weird transformation of the pawn structure, Magnus giving up his dark-squared bishop on b2, playing c3, and playing d4, a very deliberate attempt at making things weird early in this game. We're going to see if it pays off. Vincent playing bishop to b4 check. Remember, it is rapid, 10-minute with I believe, a 2-second bonus. And from the opening, I mean, Magnus is, according to every computer and probably human in the world, just worse. He's got a slightly worse position. His knights look kind of nice, and he has a lot of pawns on the dark squares, but Vincent is playing a very logical game. Controls the only open file, really. And yeah, the only downside to Vincent's position is that he has a damaged pawn structure. He has an isolated pawn on d5, but it is the bishop that is kind of the shining light of the black position. Magnus trying to trade, and basically, you're about to see, very happily walks into an endgame against Vincent, and I think somewhere here even offers a trade of queens. Like, really intent, hell-bent on playing the young German phenom in a pure endgame. For anybody that likes combat sports, I just mentioned Riyadh. There's a bunch of boxing. I've been watching all the boxing events that happen there. Like UFC. Like now they're going there. There's the Adesanya, Imavov is going to be there. Speaking of like one-on-one type of combat, here's like a great example. I always say that Magnus is like the Khabib of chess. When he starts wrestling you, you're cooked. You're cooked. There is nothing you can... the game plan. You can't stop it. You just have to adapt to it. Magnus has 2 knights and 6 pawns. What on earth can he possibly do to you, right? Well, his knights are going to go jump around, horsing around, if you will. He walks over to the other side of the board. The question is, do you want to make the trade here? Vincent, not sure. Not sure. Puts the knight back on e4, and now Magnus is going to instigate a little bit after dancing a little bit longer, trying to get Vincent, and now a5, this very big moment. What do you do here? What do you do? You got 10 seconds on the clock. What do you do? Do you take the pawn on a5, leaving this pawn isolated? Do you push to kind of lock everything up? Vincent chooses the wrong move. And now he's got 5 seconds. You're in a scramble. You're in a scramble. The knight goes to c5. You go like this. That's still fine. You go like this. Now the king is in. Magnus is giving you his pawn to take the other one, and you accidentally trade into a losing king and pawn endgame. Why? Because your opponent is a surgeon. He walks the king over here, plays f3. The black king has to stay protecting against the promotion of this pawn, so there's absolutely nothing you can do. Now I have secured enough distance among all these pawns. I come back. Here's the threat. e4. So you have to go f5. King d4. Now the threat is this. Now the threat is the c pawn. You have to go defend against it. I'm going to eat, and I win. Yeah, the way he wins these games is just bananas. Like, only him. Really, it's only him. Like, most grandmasters here would not be able to beat Vincent Keimer. They just wouldn't. They wouldn't have the energy, the tenacity, and there wouldn't be any form of psychological advantage. Magnus finds a way. He just asks enough questions until the very end. Somewhere here, Vincent needed apparently to go that way. Going that way was wrong. The defensive mechanism was to keep the king on the e6 square. Very subtle details, perfectly exploited by Magnus, who trades, walks over, makes that trade, and that's very important because there was no other way to make e4 work. So he has to use all the last remaining resources. The only pawn that hasn't moved, it moves 61 moves into the game, and he gets the job done. Now, remember, it's a round robin. Magnus drew the second game against Keimer, and he had a game against Jan Nepomniachtchi. This is a rematch of the 2021 World Chess Championship match. E4, E5, knight F3, knight F6. Knight takes. Petrov, this is the Jan bread and butter. He's probably the world's leading expert on the Petrov opening, maybe behind, me, because I'm really good at it. I'm just kidding. Knight E5 comes back, and knight E4. Here, white has two main lines, which are d4 and knight c3. Knight c3 is known as the classical variation. It's a very solid system. White goes here, white develops the queen, white castles long, and that's exactly what white wants. Black castle short, and we have this sort of dynamic game where white wants to attack, and black also in many positions wants to attack. But sometimes, like, those attacks don't happen at all. Now, you may be wondering how in the first game, Magnus is 29.06, and how in the second game, he's 28.38. And the honest answer is, I have absolutely no idea. I think that was a chess.com bug, because, like, later on, he's 29.06 again, and now he's 28. I actually straight up do not have a clue. I don't know. I think one is his rapid rating, and the other is his chess.com. I have no clue. Don't ask. Later on, he's 28.38 again. Then he's 29.06. Maybe when he's white, he's 29. Nope. Don't know. I'd love to have an answer for you, but somebody from chess.com will likely watch this and be like, that's weird. I don't know why he's listed as two different ratings. Yeah, I'd love to answer that. I don't know. H4. And as we can see, Nepo gets his light square bishop out, wants to trade it. We have the following position. It is Magnus, whose attack is a little bit faster, but Jan is ready to build things up. Maybe b5, maybe play for the center. He'll make a decision soon. c4 and h5. It's very clear here that things right now are working out a little bit more for Magnus. It feels like he's a little bit faster into the attack. We have a6, which is kind of a weird waiting move. This is almost always going to be good in modern days. Computers love this stuff. And now queen c3, keeping an eye on the king. And keeping an eye over here. Very nice position for white. Jan here has the possibility to go b5. He doesn't. He goes here, which is fine. And now Magnus plays this move. The pawn is supported. It's taking away squares on g7. It's weakening the black king. It's also good in the endgame because the pawn on h7 is always going to be capturable. f5, king b1. f5 is a little bit maybe too much, opening up a pawn like that near the king. Again, a little bit surprised Jan doesn't want to play c5, b5. Like, you would think the opposite side castling dynamic and everything, and he would go for it. Magnus plays king b1. Jan's still kind of waiting. He's sort of like still not attacking. Magnus goes here, and he's waiting for an opportunity, but Jan threatens a draw, and I really do mean threatening a draw with black. Now we have g4, which is crazy. I mean, g4 is a ridiculous move. The point of g4 is that now if b5, it might be too late. You might have things like b3 and bishop b2. Like, there might be something brewing on this diagonal. So Jan here, absolutely crazy move. He calls the bluff. He takes the pawn on h6, opening up the h-file, and not only opening up the h-file, giving the pawn back to Magnus on the d6 square, but the point is he gets the bishop to g7 with a laser beam on the queen. Queen goes to a5. Knight dips out to f8. It's a very, very high-level Petrov. I have never seen a Petrov like this, where black's got this sort of armada, never got the queen side rolling, but is sort of sitting and waiting. Magnus plays b3, and Jan, I mean, Jan's doing very well. He's completely neutralized the attack. Neutralized it very nicely. Queen on e7. How's Magnus going to make progress? I don't know. Darts into e2, gives up the pawn on f4, but here comes queen f1 check, forcing Magnus to play passive. Queen f2 is grabbed. Yo, if anybody's going to win this game, it is black, because the 2-on-1 in the endgame. It's important to note that if Magnus were to offer the queen trade here, I guess this version would be losing this, then after queen takes d2, it is actually only black who's playing for a win due to the outside pass pawn. Outside pass pawn is a pawn that has nothing stopping it from walking down the board, and it's also on the outskirts, in this case, on the h-file. So something goes wrong here, though. After queen f4, Jan sort of loses the thread. After rook e6, the rook sneaks into the back rank, which proves to be a bigger problem than it seems. Maybe he thought he was already under some pressure, but keeping activity with the queen would have probably been best. You can allow the queen to go to f6, but then there's king g8 and you're safe. I'm not saying I would have played that. I'm just simply saying that's it looks dangerous here, but you always have queen e1 and queen e5 to trade the queen, not to mention queen e7. But something definitely goes wrong, and all of a sudden, all of Magnus's pieces are alive, and not only are they alive, they are asking a lot of questions. Queen d2, and it's just not an easy position to play with 50 seconds. Jan is actually more than capable of playing it with 50 seconds, but rook b7, and suddenly you can't make a move. It's very tough. I mean, here, you kind of run out of moves with black, and he did. He ran out of moves, and you talk about getting shish kebabbed. Have you ever seen four pieces standing like this next to each other, and not a single one of them can move? Because if one of them does move, rook takes d7. The king on g8 would have also made sense, but knight e5 is kind of insane that you have just a giga super omega skewer. If knight takes, you obviously are taking that, and if rook takes, rook d7, and the king is the most important thing. King is safe, and black's king is anything but safe. So Magnus outmaneuvers Jan Nepomniachtchi, wins a very, very nice game. But like I said, there was a young man named Denis Lazovic, who is the dark horse of the tournament, and scorned by some of his colleagues at the high level. Denis Lazovic was a monster today. He was playing this setup with d4, c4, knight f3, e3. He played it multiple times. It's a very non-committal, extremely solid setup, which sort of provokes people with the black. By the way, why does MVL have 0-0-0? Why is chess broadcasting so broken all the time? Bishop e2, like, everywhere. Chess clocks everywhere, like nothing. And now he's got all his time back. d6, knight c3, knight d2. Now it becomes kind of a Benoni. And now it becomes kind of like a Banco Gambit. So MVL sacrificing a pawn. Lazovic just a clean pawn up. Advancing the pawns on the queen side. I mean, look at that. Rook a4 is epic. Rook a4 is... It's not a good move, but it's an epic move. Knight g4 from MVL, and now rook a4 absolutely pays off massive dividends because kaboom, knight takes d5, the bishop has to take, and now that rook comes over and takes. MVL is one of the best tactical players in the world, but right now, if you trade all the pieces, there are not going to be many tactics remaining, and he has lost all of his queenside pawns, and Denis the Menace Lazovic, is cleaning up. Bishop d3, playing solid, playing quickly, trading pieces, and he's taking the game to an endgame. Rocks, by the way, that is like the 9th time the rook has been on the a4 square this game. And yeah, just 2 pawns up, going deep into an endgame, and that's it. It's 5 pawns versus 3. Denis Lazovic does not have a huge amount of time, but he is a very good player. He goes to an opposite-colored bishop endgame, but this is still winning. Opposite-colored bishop endgames are very drawable, but not in a situation where you have many pawns spread apart. And right now, white has too many pawns, and they are too far spread apart. Black cannot defend pawns that are that spread apart. b4, bishop d4. At some point, he's going to start pushing. Actually, I think here he blunders the draw. He should have just went that way. He should have just went king e5 and traded. And this would have been just a totally winning endgame because, like I said, the pawns are too spread out. He actually blunders a draw, which is kind of hilarious. But then he re-wins it, I think. Yeah, somewhere here, MVL gets out-shuffled. I think right here, king c6 was a losing move. He needed to keep the king to the center. But again, the lesson is if the pawns are too far apart, more often than not, it's simply winning. And this is a position where it is simply winning because you go like this. Black has to ultimately play defense, and he is just going to run out of space. And he does. King gets to f8, you're going to promote. Lazovic gets the job done. He got the job done versus MVL. He got the job done multiple times today, including against Firouzja. But Magnus himself played a very, very, very fun match. This was a goofy match. I would have loved to show up today and be like, Magnus was unstoppable. He beat absolutely everybody he played. It wasn't like that, man. It was not like that. It was like that for the first 2 games. Then he played Wesley Big Chad So. That is actually his nickname. Magnus back to 2906, gaining and losing 70 points every single game. In this game, Magnus allowed Black to get a central blockade, and then he traded it off. And the position was pretty balanced. It was a pretty equal game. Wesley developing, centralizing his queen, developing the bishop, putting his knight, everything good. Magnus, now Magnus like surgeon, technician, all those big words that Gotham uses that are 6 letters long, like 7 letters long. Magnus gonna do his Wesley, there was nothing to say. Wesley was playing fantastic. Knight f6. Magnus got a little initiative, but it was a little bit weird. Now we got to go to an endgame. And Wesley grabs a pawn. Magnus grabs a pawn back. Wesley goes here. And suddenly, it looks like, Magnus has made all the progress into the position. Knight d5 and knight c7. Just, look at that. Wesley takes on f6. And if Magnus does this, check here, knight g5, it's just a draw. It's 4 pawns each, rook and knight, rook and knight. Instead, Magnus goes knight c7, which makes sense. It's a fork, and after rook e7, you take this, and but wait a second, but actually, if this, Black can play rook c8, and crazily enough, the rook is trapped. You can protect it, but knight g8 attacks the rook, and now you have to lose this knight. You have 2 knights for a rook. It's over. Black is winning. That's crazy. So Magnus goes there. Wesley centralizes the knight, and I got news for you. This is anything but easy. Rook e7, king e7. Your knight is trapped. Now, you might not lose the knight, because it's going to take him a long time, but you're not going to win this position. Black's going to get a lot of counterplay, and Magnus decides, well, why would I make a draw when I can blunder the game away in 1 move? Black is threatening knight e3. And Magnus is like, I want the audience to feel like connected to me in some capacity. Rook e5, if knight e3 check, you take and you're worse. But Magnus he just didn't see this move. He played rook e5 in 2 seconds. That just loses because rook e5 takes as a fork. I don't know what happened, but he's just like you. He loses to Wesley, so Wesley outplays Magnus and wins the game with a tactic. Now, the way this works, they play a 2-game mini-match, and Magnus beat everybody and drew everybody up to this point. Now Magnus has to try to play for a win with Black. I mean, good luck, Not easy. Tries to kind of keep the game very tense, develops all his pieces, makes the trade, and he plays in a very ambitious way, but Wesley's not gonna. Wesley just punishes him right away. Now if you take on d5, there is this beautiful knight d4. This is hanging. This is a threat. This is a threat. Magnus is just losing. And this happens. Sometimes you want to play a bit provocatively, and the guy just goes here. And the problem for Black is if e5, the bishop is just out of the game. Black's got too many positional weaknesses. Knight e1, f3, e4, and it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. Magnus proceeds to spend a bunch of time. He has 3 minutes versus 7. Knight is in on e6. The queen has to go here. He's completely lost. This is so crazy. Completely crazy. And yet it is in the recap because I think there is a bit more to this story. Wesley could have taken this pawn and taken another pawn, escaped with 2 pawns, and Black can't castle. I have absolutely no idea why he didn't do that. This is a fork and that's a free pawn. I'm not that good, but I see it. Wesley goes here, fine. Magnus now counterattacks the knight with the king. This is ridiculous. If you take this, Magnus wants to take like this and then take the knight. And if you go here trying to defend the knight, there's knight e5 counterattacking the queen, and then, this is... And then if queen c7, there's king e6, which is wild that this even works, and somehow it's not losing. Knight takes g7 now played. And, I mean, Magnus is still just losing. It is +2, but he's got a king in the center. He's got a hope and a prayer. Queen c4, here comes the knight. Queen h4, the king's just running. King's running around Oslo. b4, knight to e6. Wesley is just sniping. I don't know how on earth black is going to survive this position. There is nothing good in black's position. Nothing. Straight up nothing. The only thing about black's position that's good is the guy playing it. The position itself is dog shite. It's not... There is nothing good about it. Magnus trades the queens. How is the guy going to win the game if he's got no queens? He has to win. F4 is GG. F4 is GG. That's it. The knight, there's a rook. You got to go here. Okay, that's a little tricky. And now I'm threatening the knight, and I'm threatening that f5 check. Magnus has to sack the rook. I mean, and I'm not yelling it because he's just losing. He's just losing. Wesley has a rook for a knight. He has a 2-point material advantage and more time. He just completely restricts Magnus. A5, trying to break through, trying to trade the game down. Rook E1? Now, what he should have probably done here is kept the rook more active. At a minimum, keep the rook on F2. At a minimum. A rook on E1 staring into the pawn is not the right way to go. He plays passively, and Magnus pounces on it right away. In the endgame, the most important thing is piece activity. Look at it. Look at Magnus's piece don't look at that move, but he had nowhere else he could have probably put the rook. Like, he could have maybe put it on G8, but I think he was a little bit worried about losing this pawn. And the other thing about rook C8 is he probably wants to go C5. Just C5, C4. Don't worry. Rook G5. H5, and suddenly all of Magnus's pieces are looking super chill. And here comes C5. What's happening? He's equalized. Not only has he equalized, bro's taken over the game. And then Wesley hangs a rook. Now, you may be wondering, why didn't Wesley take like this? Or why didn't Magnus take? Because after this, there would have been pawn takes, king takes, and this pawn and this bishop. And I don't think Magnus has to win, so he can't take the rook. So he goes here, and now he takes the rook. Because now he's winning. Magnus just straight up won this game. Yeah, come on, man. And so we had to play an Armageddon. Now, the way this works is black gets less time, but if a draw is achieved, black wins. And the players bid for the amount of time that they want to start with at a disadvantage. Wesley bid 7 minutes and 32 seconds, meaning he wanted to play black, but only if he got 7 minutes and 32 seconds on the clock. Magnus bid 6 minutes and 37 seconds. So Magnus trusts to play with the black pieces with 6:30 on the clock, 3 and almost a half minutes less than Wesley. And the point here is that at the 60th move, they get bonus time, but Magnus can also win with the black pieces. It was a Sicilian, which is kind of fascinating that, again, Magnus has to play for a draw, but he would actually rather play a very combative and dynamic Sicilian defense because it forces Wesley to spend time, which is the best way to bridge the gap. And guess what? The gap was bridged. I mean, the opening was super strange, super complicated. Both guys got their pieces out, and from this point forward, Wesley had to choose a plan. He's got a 3-minute time advantage that he was granted because of the bid. So now Wesley is spending a lot of time. He spends 20 seconds on the move H3. Then he spends another 20 seconds on this move. Magnus playing all these moves pretty quickly. Rook E1, H6, King H2. But Wesley just somehow can't come up, and now he's only got a 2-minute time advantage. Remember, he started the game with a 3-minute and nearly 30-second time advantage. So after bishop d6, where Magnus actually did spend a lot of time, and now Magnus spends even more time, it's almost back to a 3-minute time advantage for Wesley. But Wesley's got to do something, right? Bishop goes to c5. What does he do? A lot of possibilities here, all very subtle. He plays knight e2 after a minute, and Magnus plants the queen on b6. And I got to tell you, he's got a pretty nice position here. Wesley plays rook e3 with the intention that if queen b2, the queen is trapped. But Magnus just slides the bishop back and puts the queen on a7 and has a pretty good position with only a 140 gap, right, after being at like 320, 330. Wesley goes king g1 because this is sort of, this is the sign of a guy that the position is just sort of stable. You don't really know what to do, so you play king g1. Magnus puts the knight on e4, and here's something inexplicable happens. Like, Wesley's got a 1 minute and 40-second time advantage. He's not winning by any stretch of the imagination, but he doesn't have to do what happens here. So his pawn is attacked. You would think you trade, and then you can obviously play king h2, sure, but then black gets some activity. So maybe you do something else. Maybe you throw in an h4. Wesley goes here and then h4, which makes perfect sense. Puts the rook back on e3, goes here again, repeats the position again, and then goes here. And he's doing great. He's got a 1 minute and 40-second time advantage. Life is good. He's not winning, but he doesn't have to do the next 3 moves. First, he moves his knight from the center. His idea was to put the knight there, or maybe put the queen, on d4. Magnus immediately pins the knight so it can't move. Now Wesley's like, aha, I have rook f3 though, and you can't do this because then I would sack my rook on f6 and then I would take this. So that's kind of nifty. And then he gets his rook trapped completely out of nowhere. Magnus in this mini match, and Magnus converts pretty easily, centralizing all his pieces, breaking through it just wins the game. It does not make a single bit of sense. Like, he was on the ropes. He lost the first game, and this was the position. I mean, you don't have to win this game with white, but you don't have to lose it. You can play king f2, rook h1. I almost want to play Magnus in this game in rapid. I'm like, yo, I feel like maybe even, dare I say, maybe I wouldn't lose. Maybe. I'm looking at this position like, you don't have to win. You just have to not. And somehow Wesley got outmaneuvered. And I love Wesley. I'm not saying I should be in this turn, but I'm like looking at him like, yo, put me in, coach. This knight can't move anywhere. I have the entire h-file. Maybe Magnus would put the bishop here and just defend him. I don't know. Maybe I'm stupid. But Magnus roars back, wins every single match of the day. And the other man, the hero of the day, was Denis Lazovic, who was just on fire. He was playing fantastic chess. He won that really nice game I showed you earlier against MVL. He outplayed Alireza Firouzja, got the bishop pair. Denis plays a very methodical style. He's just kind of slowly improving his pieces. He keeps tension pretty well. He makes the right trades at the right moments. He's very solid, doesn't really blunder too often. And he's just sort of methodical. By the way, same structure. Look at this. King here, bishop here, just like in the Wesley game. But the second you let Denis get a little bit of initiative, all of a sudden some stuff's going on here, and Alireza hangs a knight. I think this must be a broadcast error of some sort, because I think there's just a hanging knight. I don't know. I don't think this is what happened. I'm trying to show you some games here, but I think there's just there were broadcasting errors the entire day. And one guy has an extra piece, apparently, and that's that. So Denis Lazovic goes on to win. I guess Alireza must have actually blundered something in the scramble, but Denis won. And there was broadcasting mistakes all day. I'm going to give you a little behind the scenes. I actually recorded an entire video this was supposed to be posted an hour earlier. When I realized that the Magnus versus Wesley Armageddon game was not here. It was not loaded. There was 2 copy games loaded. So Magnus leads and tied with Denis. So that's Denis Lazovic. That's going to be very exciting. The top 2 from the group stage make it to the semis. The bottom 2 get eliminated, and then the 4 in the middle have to play a round robin against each other. Bit of a late upload here today for day number 1, but hopefully we'll be a little bit faster for the second day. And yeah, Esports World Cup, big news, and also the Chesley launch sale. What's going on right now? Secure the lowest launch price. I'll see you tomorrow. Get out of here.